If you're joining us, we would love for you to type in your location so we can see where you all are. Great. Hi, Hilda. Fantastic. So we'll take a couple of minutes just to let some folks stream in, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. But welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. Uh-oh. Yeah.
So it looks like we lost Poonam on the video, and also
we lost both of us apparently.
Okay.
And troubleshoot that and get us back up.
It looks like the internet's being pretty slow.
Okay.
But you won't lose audio.
Okay, so it seems like it's an internet connectivity problem. So we shouldn't lose audio, but hopefully the video will come back once our internet is back and running at the speed it should be.
Yeah, but here, even on mine.
Yeah, and here too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there we are. Okay, hopefully that won't happen again, but we shouldn't be losing audio, so at the very least that will be there throughout. If you're just joining us, we'd love for you to type in your location if you're able to do that. Hello, Jennifer.
Looks like you have a few participants just via phone.
So there are a few folks who are joining us just by phone. Welcome. Thank you for being with us today. And we'll talk a little bit about the technology we're using in a few minutes when we get started. Okay, we'll get started in just one more minute. Thanks for your patience. Cool. Okay, so we're going to get started, and folks will join us as they can. Thank you for being part of our webinar, our informational webinar for the inaugural Speaking Race to Power Fellowship. We're going to tell you a little bit today about Coraline's vision and goals for the fellowship, and we'll be taking questions throughout. So if you have questions, feel free to type them up if you can. At the end, we'll also take questions for those of you who are participating by phone. Just so you know about the technology, you should be able to hear us all, but you are all automatically on mute. And again, we'll open it up for questions at the end for those of you who are participating by phone. My name is Poonam. I'm the Fellowship Manager at Coraline. I'm an alumna of the Generative Fellowship Program, and I'm excited to be working on the development of the Speaking Race to Power Fellowship. And we are in Oakland. And I will turn it over to Sujata.
Hi, all. Thank you once again. We're super pleased to have all of you on the call. And as Poonam mentioned, this is our inaugural Speaking Race to Power Fellowship. So we know that a lot of people have questions, and we're also figuring out as we go along how we're talking about this. So if at any point there's anything that's unclear or that you just want to hear more about, please just chat your question. We have a short presentation, so we're going to start out with the presentation, but really want to leave as much time at the end as possible for discussion and questions. So at which point, at the end, after our presentation, after our slides, we will unmute everybody and folks can just let us know if they want to just share their questions. So to start out, many of you already know Coraline, and I see many names that I recognize of folks who've been a part of our programs. But overall, just sort of the big picture of Coraline is our goal is really to be of service to the movement. And when we say movement, we really mean the reproductive health rights and justice movement. Recognizing that we're going to need all of our passion and energy and conviction and work to see the kind of world where all people have resources, rights, and respect for their sexual and reproductive lives. And so we very much see ourselves as serving the whole movement, and that as part of that service to the movement, two primary goals of ours are to create and support a network of innovative and courageous leaders around the country, and particularly we know that there's a lot of activity and resources on the East and West Coast in the United States, and we have a particular focus and investment in the southern and central part of the country where you all know that the most egregious stuff is happening. And so we really want to give support and resources to leaders in the central and southern part of the country, and really the leaders who are stepping up to be both innovative and courageous. And secondly, our goal is to cultivate a culture of innovation, collaboration, and an orientation to impact. And what this means is that as Coraline was launched about 2.5 years ago, and rather than look at what are the additional resources that we need, because we recognize that we will always need them, we wanted to say, what are the things that we can shift internally within our movement to be more effective? And really, what is getting in our way of being the most powerful and courageous leaders that we can be? And part of what we found was that this movement, for a variety of historical reasons, has not been a movement currently that supports either a lot of collaboration. In fact, the model tends to be more towards organizational competition. It tends not to support innovation, in part because it feels like things are so risky that to try anything that might possibly fail or not work out seems so terrifying that we tend not to try riskier, more innovative stuff. And lastly, that as we have, as this movement has tried to work, we have tended to focus more on activities that we thought is promising and less really towards measuring impact. And so part of Coraline's goals is to really create the environment for leaders to be innovative, collaborative, and with an orientation to impact. And so part of that is as we have traveled the country and worked in a lot of different parts of the United States, we've done at least almost 50 events in 13 different states. One of the things that comes up again and again has been the issue of race and power. And leaders both on the East and West Coast, but also in the central and southern part of the country, cite again and again that the issues around race and power has been some of the most significant barriers to collaboration and strategizing and risk-taking in many ways, that you need to really be able to trust your partners and allies before you're able to take risk and try different things. And that a part of that has been that there have been both very few opportunities and no training and skill sets that have been developed to address issues of race and power that leads to deeper collaboration and trust. And I can speak from my experience in this work, which has been when issues of race and power have come up, they've come up in such a charged way where we haven't had a shared framework or language around it. And many times people have walked away actually feeling more hurt and more damaged and less heard by each other. And so we at Coraline think that speaking race, the ability to reach out across racial differences and racial tensions, is an essential competency of all leaders, regardless of this movement, but really that if we are about the business of social change in a more socially just world, that we need, every one of us needs to develop this skill and competency around speaking race, and that this competency needs to be practiced and supported, that it just doesn't happen. And so, as we thought about, okay, so if this is one of the challenges in the movement, who are the best positioned to help support this kind of work? And Coraline does have this history of bringing together leaders across the reproductive health rights and justice movements, across the different sectors, in very intentional spaces where there has been both cross-sector work, but also cross-organization and cross-power interaction. So we have done breakthrough conversations where there have been volunteers and activists in organizations who are in conversations with executive directors and funders in terms of what are the kinds of breakthrough conversations that we need to have in this movement. Also, given our support and cultivation of innovation, collaboration, and impact, this also seemed like a key component, being able to speak race to power, the key component of all three of these cultural practices in our movement. And ultimately, one of our big goals is an effective long-term strategy for the movement. It's a collaborative, coordinated long-term strategy. And this is really borrowing from our opponents in the conservative movement, who've done a very good job of having a long-term strategy where different groups and organizations and people are playing different roles. And we want to see that same kind of coordination and long-term planning for our movement. And if race and power have been such a bottleneck and a barrier to collaboration and to trust, then that's one of the things that we need to be breaking through in order to move the work forward, so that we can get to a 30-year strategy. So in this fellowship, the Speaking Race to Power Fellowship, the primary framework for the fellowship is a framework of radical collaboration. And many of us in our work often talk about collaborations, we talk about coalitions, but we mean something very specific, particularly when we talk about radical collaboration. And that means that it's collaboration really across status quo, across comfort, across power, and across difference. That, in fact, the most powerful form of collaboration is when we can find a pathway to collaborate and work with each other, even when there have been historical differences, and even when there are current differences in power and in authority in a working relationship. And so the primary framework for this fellowship is how do we learn and practice radical collaboration and create a community that shares that practice together so that we can always be refreshing and supporting each other. And so the components of the fellowship are, one, it's going to be building community, that in fact we all need a safe space where we can test out our ideas, get supportive feedback as we figure out how to try new and risky stuff, and that community is a key component to that, so that we're not out there alone, off on our own journeys, but that we're doing this with a group of people. So many of you have heard about our Innovation Fellowship, and we think about innovation not as just an individual idea, but really as an ongoing practice and a process of innovation. And so we will be teaching some of those skills. We will focus on emotional intelligence, and it's both emotional and social intelligence. So how do we become aware of how we feel about things and how that affects how we show up in the world, but also how do we develop some awareness and practice around understanding how other people experience us, so that as we learn to speak race to power, that we need to be both aware of ourselves and our experience, but also aware of other people's experience. We practice a lot of resilience, and this comes both out of our Innovation Fellowship, but we define resilience as the ability to bounce back from failure on purpose. So it's not just to recover from failure, but to bounce back from it and say, okay, this is what I'm heading towards. This is my purpose and what I'm trying to do. How do I now figure out something different? How do I get some feedback so I can tweak it? But really, sort of resilience is this notion that a one-time effort is never going to be enough when we're doing difficult social change work. And so we need to have a capacity for resilience to keep on coming back again and again. Another component piece of this is going to be complexity, and we're still figuring this piece of the work out, but we really think about complexity as the ability to hold multiple viewpoints, value them, but then still figure out a strategy for moving forward. So how do we hold multiple realities, multiple perspectives, multiple needs as we move forward in our leadership? We will do some work around implicit bias, which is probably some of the most recent thinking around race and power. And finally, we're going to do all of this work of radical collaboration in a context where it is applied learning and reflection. So the notion is, and Poonam will talk about this more, is that everybody is coming in with a project that you're going to do a couple of iterations of trying out during the 6 months, but it's applied learning. So you're not spending 6 months developing some elaborate plan of what you will do after the fellowship, but it is within the context of the 6 months of the fellowship that you will be trying out ways to address race and power, and then come back to this community of support that you're building in the fellowship to get feedback, support, and bounce back to try something again. Let me see, am I on for the next slide? Yes, I am. Okay, so possible project ideas. And this, I think, is probably one of the more unique aspects of this fellowship. Oftentimes when people talk about issues of race and power, they either talk about it in the context of a learning, like, we need to do some diversity training, we need to learn how to understand each other, or they tend to talk about it in terms of broader structural problems around race and inequality. But what we want to do is really, at that intersection of both interpersonal and, in a sense, micro-racism and macro-structural inequalities, talk about what are projects that we as leaders can move so that we can start shifting the dynamics in our movement. And so the project ideas are things like a situation in which a person of color is addressing an issue with a white person, a predominantly white organization, or an institution that has been predominantly defending the interests of white people within our movement. Another possible project idea is a situation in which a person of color is addressing another person of color, so either within the same racial ethnic group or from a different group, recognizing that often racial tension and distrust can also happen between groups and that people of color are not a homogenous group. And then also a situation in which a white person is addressing an issue with another white person, a predominantly white organization, or once again, an institution that is serving white people. And so really when we talk about these projects, we're really thinking about them as multidimensional. So it's not just, people of color talking to white people or white people talking to people of color, but it's really like in whatever forms that barriers to trust and collaboration have emerged in your work, that any space where radical collaboration is going to move the work forward and race has been an issue, those are the kinds of collaborative projects that we're talking about. Let me just move to the next slide. And I think, okay. So these are some of the things that we have, I've already covered a little bit, but the goals of the fellowship is to offer that applied experiential learning space that is solution-oriented, so explicit understanding that you're going to be trying things out in this fellowship, and that really it is about resolving the issues or addressing the issues. It's also about creating a community with a shared language and practice to proactively address these issues, and then finally, one of the goals is to increase leaders' capacity to develop radical collaboration across difference and create new possibilities for collaboration. And now I'm going to pass it to Poonam.
So I'm going to give Sujatha a little break there, and I'm just going to talk with you a little bit logistically about what we're looking for. So in general,
sorry, just a second before you start. I just want to encourage folks once again to chat any questions or even comments or thoughts that you have as we're going along, so don't wait till the end, but keep the conversation going.
Great, yes, and feel free, again, to stop us if there are questions as we're going through each of the slides. In general, with the Coraline programs, we're looking for folks who are curious and generative and generous, and in particular willing to lean into risk and discomfort. As Sujatha mentioned, these are challenging conversations to have. They require a lot of courage, and so we want people who feel comfortable both leaning into the risk of having those conversations and leaning into the risk of failing and trying again. We're asking that folks come with an understanding and an agreement to a structural analysis of racism, and their project idea must be related to breaking through barriers to collaboration and movement building caused by these these divisions around race and power. And again, I don't want to miss this part where the project must require courage. We're asking people to have to tell us about brave conversations they've had in the past, and we're recognizing that these conversations can be scary and uncomfortable. And so if they don't feel scary or uncomfortable, they might not be the project for this this particular fellowship. We're asking people to take pretty brave leaps here. So those are the requirements. In addition to that, and we've mentioned this on the website, we're asking for folks who have worked with Coraline either through a breakthrough conversation, a regional field event, the generative fellowships, or the 30-year strategies, because we're looking for folks for this pilot cohort who are familiar with Coraline's vision and approach to this. I see that there are 2 questions. Can you address the logistics of how several people in a team can participate? Absolutely. So teams are not a requirement. We are open to teams. Every person on a team has to apply individually, however. Does that answer your question, Monica?
And let me just just add to that, which is I think these are great projects that lend themselves to teams, and we also don't want the need to have other people to get in the way of the possibility of moving the work forward. So we expect that there will be a lot of individual applications, and then a lot of, we hope, will also be several team applications, and teams can be anywhere from more than one person. So, you could apply with a team of 2 or more. And like Poonam said, the selection is based on the individual application, although we do recognize that you're applying in the context of a team.
I see a question about, is this restricted to U.S. if a person lived or traveled to gather international perspectives and compared with domestic perspectives? That sounds like it's a specific project idea. Is that correct? I'll give it. Okay, we'll just okay. So it sounds like a project idea is comparing international and domestic perspectives on, I guess, I think it's not clear exactly on what, perspectives on what.
So as the person is clarifying what they mean, I just want to also add, so remember that this is a project where people are actually talking or addressing an issue of race and power. So for example, it could be you work in an organization that's predominantly white. What are the strategies that you use to shift the barriers and dynamics around that so that something changes within the organization? And so a big part of this, as people clarify their projects, is that there's going to be somebody or some organization or some institution, but primarily it's going to be some person that you're going to be engaged with, addressing, or trying to move in order to have a breakthrough around this. And so, so I don't know if that helps. Hopefully that helps clarify it also.
See some typing, so I guess we'll wait.
Yeah. Poonam, do you want to try and address the previous question while Acacia is still typing?
Is that, I see a question, what if a member of the team has no prior connection to Coraline? So I assume that if a team is applying and each person individually on that team is applying, we're asking that every person who applies has a connection to Coraline, either through participation in the breakthrough conversations, the regional field events, the generative fellowships, or the 30-year strategy. So if a person on the team has not participated in one of those activities, then they wouldn't be eligible for this particular cohort, which is the first cohort. After this first cohort, we will open it up to the public, and so you won't need any prior participation in a Coraline event to be a Speaking Race Power Fellow.
And just so folks know, we expect to do this fellowship every 6 months. So if the timing doesn't work right in terms of the 2 retreats that are scheduled, or if there's somebody who doesn't yet have experience with Coraline, just know that probably come May or June of 2015, there will be another opportunity to apply.
Right. And actually, that moves us into the next slide. So I think it's worth it for us to just move on to that one. And so we're asking everyone that everyone fully participate in the 6-month program, which includes the completion of 2 weekend retreats. One that is a 3-day retreat at the very beginning of December 4th through 7th of 2014, and then a 3-day retreat in mid-June, which means that our application process for the second cohort will start late spring, so that we will have everyone selected and ready to start by mid-June. In between the 2 retreats, we ask that all of the fellows actively participate in peer coaching and networking with the folks in their cohort. We ask that they work on their projects independently and in peer coach small groups that will meet virtually and or in person. And then we'll also be holding 2 webinars related to content coverage offered between the retreats. Finally, we ask that everyone create and complete a final activity that communicates sort of the culmination of the fellowship of the project, something that they've learned, something that feels particularly meaningful to them about their fellowship experience. Does anyone have any questions about the commitments? We don't have the dates yet for mid-June, but we will have them very soon, so we will put those up on the website as soon as we do.
And then just to go back to the, I think your name is pronounced Acacia, the question around sort of the international project. So it sounds like your project would fit in terms of what is the barrier within the United States that needs to get shifted in order for further collaboration, and it sounds like it's more international collaboration, and that's totally fine. And also know that you are welcome to reach out to either me or Poonam after this to get more clarity if you just need to know more.
The next cycle of applications will be due in late spring. We don't have a hard deadline on that yet, but I'm assuming it will be probably April, based on the timeline that we're using now. So as soon as we have that information, we will put it up on the website. We'll have it before, within the next couple of months. Great. Okay, so just very quickly, and these are also on the website. In order to apply, we ask that everyone create a profile in the Coraline online network. And then the application includes your most current resume or CV, a description of how structural racism affects your personal and professional life, a story in which you had a courageous conversation about race and power, your proposed project idea that involves breaking through barriers of race and power. And all of this needs to be in one file, so if you could send it to me in one document, that would be great. And the deadline is 11:59 Pacific time on September 15th, which is next Monday. And my information is right there. It's poonam.dreyfus-pi@coraline.org. Okay. So I'm going to give us time now for questions. Okay, so it looks like Monica is saying that their project is going to require a team, and that her colleagues are not eligible for the cycle, so that so it sounds like they're going to delay their application.
So looking at the question from Hilda about addressing a project addressing issues of race and power in philanthropy. So Hilda, for your project to qualify, you would actually have to have a very specific instance in which you want to shift those dynamics. So for example, is there a particular foundation that you want to do something specific? And who would be the people that you would need to be addressing this issue with in order to see the kind of shift that you want to see? So it's not a broad set of tools, but it's much more and it might be that your project actually ends up in a toolkit, but the expectation is that during the fellowship you would actually attempt the conversations, attempt to have the meetings, attempt to do whatever it is that is getting in the way of either learning more about how to effectively have those kinds of conversations and projects within philanthropy, or actually try out what you need to do to shift it. So that's where the applied learning comes in. Poonam, I'm having a hard time tracking all the questions. Can you see one that we haven't answered yet?
I see that Lindsay says, will you have the June date by September 15th? We will try our hardest to have that done. I think we're very close to solidifying it, so hopefully we can.
For the retreat.
Yeah.
Well, we probably won't have the exact date.
In terms of Acacia's question around if you're already working on it, definitely still apply. It doesn't have to be a brand new project or something from scratch. Because in truth, many of us are already trying to address issues of race and power in our work and activism, and then this is really also an opportunity for some of us to get some additional boost in skills and practice around it. So yeah, there's no expectation that it's a brand new project.
There's another question here that says, is the goal of the fellowship to create some type of tool to address the identified barrier?
No, so the goal of the fellowship is really to get practice in actually identifying and trying to work through the barrier. So for some people, it might, based on your applied learning through the fellowship, you might, after the fellowship, decide that you want to create a toolkit based on what you've learned, but this really is the practice of breaking through the barrier. So, do you need to get a bunch of folks organized in your workplace to have this conversation? Do you need to be having a courageous conversation with one person to move the work along? So, there might just be a bunch of different strategies that you're going to try over the 6 months, but it really is the applied aspect of it. Any other questions?
What happens after the 6-month period?
That's a great question. So our goal, and this is both our goal in our generative fellowship and also this one, is that this is going to be an ongoing community that's going to continue to grow. We recognize that shifting long term the dynamics around race and power in our movements requires both sustained and systematic and institutional change. And so our goal here is to create a community of people, both people of color and white people, who share a similar language and practice around addressing issues of race and power, so that collectively we can build both our ability to do this work more effectively and that we can continue to support each other. And so what we have found in our innovation fellowship is that the more people share a language of innovation, the more they're able to accelerate innovation. And our hope is similar here, that the more people share a language and a practice around addressing race and power, the more we can accelerate change and transformation in the movement. So probably based on what we have seen in our innovative fellowship, our generative fellowship, the cohort usually tends to stay pretty connected, and Lindsay, you can probably speak to this, or Poonam, you can speak to this, but then as we add subsequent cohorts, we're going to do work to keep folks connected and do some ongoing refresher and learning practices in between. So this really is also about creating a community of people who share a vision and a commitment and a practice together around race and power. It's a great question. All right. Any additional questions? Poonam, do you want to unmute everybody in case folks have a verbal question to ask?
Sure. Sarah has changed us to question and answer. So if you're on the phone or if you wanted to participate by speaking, feel free to ask your question that way. There is there's a file question request button. Where is that?
Should be up near their audio.
I see Lindsay, can you confirm that the second retreat won't be the first weekend of June? We will take that into consideration, Lindsay, as we do the scheduling, but we hope to have a place confirmed soon. Oh, place and confirmed really soon.
And as soon as we have that confirmed, we'll put it on the website and we'll alert all folks. Okay, that's really helpful for us to know, Lindsay, actually, that the summit is happening that weekend. We want, there are probably lots of folks that we would love to have join us that will be attending the summit. So thank you for letting us know.
All right. Any additional questions or comments? And once again, just remember, you can reach out either to Poonam or to me if you have any additional questions. We are super excited about this fellowship. It took us a while to figure out what we wanted to do on this issue. And we are feeling very hopeful that this is going to be an informative and hopefully transformative experience for all of us. So on that note, any last thoughts?
There's someone trying to speak. Go ahead.
So I'm just trying to understand in terms of the fellowship, what is covered through the fellowship. Is the travel to the convenings that we are required to attend covered as a part of the fellowship process? I mean, funding for the fellowship, and I just would like some clarification on that.
Sure. Coraline does cover the cost of your attending the retreat. So that includes travel and the stay at the retreat centers that we'll be at. As far as the actual fellowship project, since we're asking folks to have to develop sort of conversation ideas, there isn't funding for the project necessarily, but there is funding for you to participate.
Yeah, our goal is that fellows have no additional costs associated with their participation in the retreats and also in any of the in-between webinars, et cetera. So yeah, so it shouldn't cost fellows anything to participate in the fellowship. Their project-related expenses are really up to them.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well, my contact information is on this last slide, so feel free to send me any questions or concerns you might have, and also feel free to reach out to Sujatha. I can connect you to her as well.
Thank you all very much, and we hope to see some applications real soon. Take care.
Thanks again. Take care.